Thanks. Yeah. Cheers. Thanks. Thanks everyone. Yeah. Thanks for joining me. So just quickly, things like this didn't happen. You go back probably 8-10 years ago when I started competitive fishing. There are a few competitive fishermen here will know that the top guys shared nothing, and I think the reason behind that was the amount you learn on these international competitions fishing with some of the top anglers in the world is crazy. I mean, you feel your level lift each time you go, and I think the previous methodology was learn it, keep it for yourself, and stay ahead of the rest of the pack. Over the last sort of 8-10 years, we've fundamentally shifted that methodology to allow for these sorts of sessions and sharing, and that's why Wayne talking about what we do at Worlds and the way we share at Worlds and today, and fly boxes and techniques, you'll see there's absolutely zero secrets behind what we do. And the idea is that if I have a chasing pack of anglers coming through competitively or just on the weekend, the more of what I know, the better, because it means I have to lift my game. And ultimately, I think that's the reason South African fishing has gone so far forward over the last 5 years. To give you an indication, when I started competition angling, we were very rarely in the top 10. We were not recognized as a country to watch out for. Today, this year alone, we've got a Commonwealth medal, we've got a ladies medal, we've got a youths medal. The seniors stuffed it up in the last session, but we were very close. Yeah, and we really are right up there. I think worldwide now we're recognized as one of the top countries to fish against, which is great to see. And what's also quite cool is other countries, their fly fishing and angling numbers are going down, while in South Africa, competition's nearly doubled its anglers in the last 3 years, and just weekend and everybody else who gets out, it's heavily on the up. So it's quite cool to see.
Sorry, 1 second. Something I forgot to ask. We're going to bring the breakfast buns to everyone. Everybody with a bake.
Yeah, so firstly, just some housekeeping. I've put flies out, my bags out, rods out, everything, no secrets. You can take photos, you can ask me whatever you want today. I promise you I won't hold anything back. You can have every piece of information I have. So if you think there's some secrets, ask and I will give you them, and we'll see if they help. But I always like to start these sessions with a story from our world, so from a competition world, because I think it kind of sets the scene on why we learn so much. So, I mean, if you can just take a second to picture, you've now flown halfway around the world, you've spent 10 days training on waters you've never fished, sometimes to fish you've never fished for, things like dace and roach and grayling and stuff we just don't get in South Africa, unfortunately. You're as prepared as you can be. You most nights going to bed at about 12 o'clock, waking up at 5, sort of 10 days in a row, so you're pretty stuffed at this point. You arrive at your bus and you have 33 countries in your group, so it's a Putco bus full of people basically, and that's just the group you're fishing against, and these are the best anglers in the world. You head off to the water, beat draws are done, the nerves are building, you step out on the water and you see a fish rising on the far bank, and you set yourself up and you make a cast and you snap it off first cast, because you're fishing typically 8 or 9x. And now you have to regroup and get it together. You're dealing with a size 22 sedge or size 22 dry fly, 9x tippet. You're shaking, it's cold, and that's kind of the scene in which we learn. So this is why I think we manage to obtain as much information, as many things as we do, and then obviously we bring them home. But that's the conditions we're working under. And change a fly, you've got sub 10 seconds because everyone else is doing it sub 10 seconds. You snap a leader to tie 3 flies back on, and a full leader minute, 90 seconds max. And if you're not doing that, you're just behind everyone else. So there is a fundamental step that you're looking to make to get there. If you watch the guys in their videos, you can picture the vol, you hook a fish on the other side of the bank, you're running. There's no walking, there's no wading sticks, you're walking. I dislocated 2 of my fingers in the last competition right out. Sector judge, please just put them back in, off we go again. That's what you're dealing with, because everyone else is doing it like that and better. So it's an interesting world. But today we're going to spend a lot of time on still waters in particular, because that's the focus of today. But the best way to run these clinics is questions, because they kind of drive the direction of what people want to learn. So please, at any point, if you've got a question, stick up your hand, don't be shy, and we'll talk about it. So we'll start with approaching the water, because I think that's a critical one. The most commonly asked question I get is probably what like, what's the best fly? And it's such a cuck question. It really is, because it's changing all the time. And more than it changing all the time, it's often not about the fly. It's typically on a stillwater or river, it's typically more about your drift, your depth, what your flies are doing through the water, so the vertical climb or vertical drop. Are you keeping them in the column where the fish are feeding? What temperature is it? What temperature is the water? Is there cloud cover? What insect life are you seeing? Is there wind chop? Are there wind lanes? On and on and on and on. And all of those factors that I'm talking about contribute far more than a fly. With that said, my favorite fly, we'll start right here, as a blank saver. There are many of them here, you can have a look. Black woolly bugger, chartreuse head. Anywhere you go in the world, that fly works. And if you ask any competitive angler, it'll be in their top 3. It's an absolute beast of a fly. It doesn't matter if you're in Ireland or Bolivia, or probably work catching tarpon in Gabon. Like, it's an unbelievable fly. So the first thing I would do in a venue like this, if I arrived, and I've never fished Oxbow, so today's quite cool for me, I would start looking at the weather conditions and probably the wind. So how many of you like to arrive and it's flat? And you can see everything going on. Yes? Yes? Yeah, lovely for casting, cuck for fishing. So we in competition terms, we call it a glass out, and the worst conditions you can fish out is a glass out. It's easier for the fish to see you. It's more difficult to catch fish because they tend to stick a little bit deeper and they're a little bit more skittish. So calm conditions like this, not ideal. I don't know if any of you have ever been fishing, it's calm like this and a little wind chop comes up and all of a sudden you start getting fish. That wind chop is what you're looking for. It allows you to kind of protect your line, protect your tippets, and the fish definitely are more active when there's a wind chop. It switches them on. So the first thing I would do here is I'd have a look. Again, venue like this, I'd be looking into the water. I'd probably take a reading of the water. Anyone know what temperature fish, trout in particular, stop feeding on both sides, hot and cold, in Celsius? Fahrenheit I can never work out, so please Celsius. Anyone here know? Yeah, so 16 to 18 is optimal. That's if you walk up to a dam and you stick a thermometer in the water and you 17 degrees, you're gonna have a great day. If they fish around, you're gonna have a great day, because that's, and just so you understand it, that's when their metabolism is moving the fastest, and because their metabolism is moving so quickly, they're eating a whole lot more, which means they're very active in the water. They'll be aggressive, your eats will be good. Anyone know what the low side is, where they stop eating, where they get lockjaw, they stop moving? Yeah. 8 degrees is kind of the point at which they stop eating. The closer you get to 8 degrees Celsius in the water, the more these fish are going to slow down. So once you get to about 12, they really start slowing down. And as you drop 11, 10, 9, 8, you'll see they go right down deep, much like they do when it's hot. They get very sluggish. They slow their metabolisms down, it's a tough word, and they have to eat far less than what they would on a normal day. It's almost like a hibernation, like a bear. They can just slow things right down, and they stop eating. So that's why on those really cold mornings and you're not getting eats, and that's why you're not getting eats. And you'll find as the day warms up, potentially by 11, 12, 1, 2, you'll start finding fish, and they'll also start moving up in the columns. So what to do on the low side? What I always like to do is I like to try and get flies right down to the bottom. So I'd be looking, do we all know how the lines work, eh? Floating, hover, midge tip, inter, DI1, DI3, DI5, DI7, sweep lines, 40 pluses? No? Right. Yeah, okay. So let me talk you through it. So if I go in a still water, I've usually got about 20 line options, which is quite complicated, but they all effectively sink within an inch of itself. My wife says an inch is about that much, so quite comfortable with that. But they all sink within an inch of each other. So you might think it's a bit stupid, like why DI3 over DI5 if you're gaining an inch sink per second? Well, the trick is, if I'm fishing numbers in a competition, the quicker that line gets down, if the fish are down there, the quicker I'm in the zone and I'm catching fish. So effectively floating sits on the water. Your hover line sits, it's pretty much a floating, but sits about 1 centimeter or 2 below the water. Anyone know why you'd want that over floating line? Like, why not just fish the floating? Yeah, the wind. So the wind catches a floating line, which is quite nice if you're fishing buzzers, creates that drag. Anyone ever caught fish on buzzers when it's dragging like that with the wind? It's quite a cool way to fish for them. But a hover sits just under the surface, so you can keep the line straight, keep in contact, but you're still right up high in the column. Midge tip is kind of one of those. So you've got a running line which will drag a bit, but you're just getting either a 3 foot or 6 foot piece down. So you can fish kind of 1 meter down or 1.5 meters down. Intermediate line, my favorite line, I've got them here, the clear int, drops through the column a little bit faster. And then as you go DR3, DR5, DR7, they get heavier and they sink faster for getting to the bottom. So again, going back to a cold day, I'd probably want to put something like a DR3 or DR5 on a dam like this, throw it out and get the flies right to the bottom, because that's where the fish are going to be holding. And when I say right to the bottom, when it's 8, 9, I would imagine the water's probably about 10, 11 degrees this morning. They're going to be holding right on the bottom, and you want to keep your flies down there slow to start, and then you want to speed up, and you want to start small and natural to start, because it's more likely early on you'll get on the more natural flies, little nymphs, skinny damsels, just natural colored small flies. And then as you change, you go bigger, brighter, and the odd quick strip on the bottom to activate and hopefully get an eat out of them. That's the game plan. If it's cold, that's what you're doing, unless you're seeing something specific that says otherwise. That's the cold side of it. The hot side of it, anyone know what point at which they stop eating on the other side, where it becomes too hot and they become lethargic? No? About 24, 23, 24 degrees, you start getting into big trouble. I'd say 22 degrees in the water is probably getting on the warm side. But once you get to 23, 24, there's two problems. One, the fish become incredibly lethargic. I don't know if you've ever had that before. You're kind of stripping slowly and you get an eat, and like, God, is that an eat? Oh, you lift the rod and like that. That's when it's starting to get too hot. And your other big problem is at that point when you're releasing fish, there's a very high chance that they're not going to make it, especially if you fight the fish long, and the bigger the fish is, you're going to have a lot of problems. So that window is very difficult to be careful of as well on the hot side. On the hot side, I tend to keep my flies a little bit higher, or I want lots of vertical movement through the column. So my biggest tip for you today on Stillwaters, and I'm going to give it to you early, is what? Somebody can guess it. They can have a cap from the American team. What? No. Close though.
The temperature of the water.
No.
Is what's a synonym for WHAT? Are they different things?
No, it's not. Anyone got it? The biggest trick to fishing a Stillwater well, I'm going to give it early. You guys are going to have it right from the start. You can go home after this actually.
Fish the columns.
Fish the columns. Who said it first? Columns. Hold on. So the columns are critical. Now lead to on hot water why you do it a little bit more. Your columns are going to be your quickest way to figuring out how to catch fish, because if you arrive at a water like this, a river is very different. When you look at a river, you've got an undercut and you've got an eddy and you've got a seam and you've got a riffle. It's like a map. You know where the fish are. You just got to be good enough to catch them. They're holding in those specific pieces of water. But a lake, you're looking at a flat top, and if you don't know a venue, you don't know much about what insect life there is, where the channel runs, you don't know how the fish feed, what types of food they're going after. But you do know that they're holding in one of the columns. Now you've got to figure out what column it is. And that's why you'll see a lot of competition anglers when they arrive at a lake or session, the first line on will typically be a clear glass intermediate, because they know they can drop that line through the columns really nicely, which means without having to change the line, they can fish 4 or 5 or 6 different columns and figure out where these fish are. The key part is typically the vertical movement through the columns. So either up, pulling your flies up through the columns, and I don't know if any of you have had it where you're fishing really deep and you're bringing the flies up from a boat or deep piece of water, and as it's coming up the bank on the dam or up on the boat, you get a that's just your flies emerging. You know about buzzers emerging and insects emerging from the bottom. It's exactly it. They're chasing that emerging pattern or something that's sinking through the columns. So there's your big tip for the day. In hot water, I would look to probably have like a glass line on and a clear int or an int, and I would try drop the flies through the column on the way down with contact. This is one of the biggest mistakes I see on the water. Guy will bomb a really nice line. The line's dangling here, he's looking there, grabbing his beer, you see his line twitch off, doesn't even know it's happened, then starts stripping. You'll be shocked at how many fish you get on the drop of your flies within the first 2 feet of that fly hitting the water, especially at venues like this where these fish have largely for the majority of their lives been fed by pellets. So how does a pellet work? It gets thrown on the water, it lands on the water, they look at it and it starts sinking and they eat it before their friend Bob gets it, because if they don't, Bob's got it or Sandy's got it, or you've got to get to that pellet really, really quickly. So that contact is important. I'd fish the columns down in hot weather, so dropping through all the columns, and I like to think of it like lanes on a highway. So I want to go through the slow lane, probably in South Africa the yellow line where the taxis drive, go through that slow lane, middle lane, fast lane, and then the white line where the armored vehicles always get robbed. So you drop through all of those and you get right through to the bottom, and then bring the flies back up through the columns. Very important. So you're bringing them back up and through and back and down. Now here's the trick. Anyone heard about counting when you cast? Cast and count. Why do we do it? Why are we counting? Yes, 100%. Yeah, so once you've made your cast, you're counting through, fishing top lane, fishing bottom lane, fishing middle lane. When you figure out where the fish are feeding for that period of time, it might be 30 minutes, might be an hour, might be 2 hours, you might have it the whole day, they're going to be feeding in that column of water. So the trick is every cast you make, now you're counting to 15, because you know at 15 they're in that lane, and you're going to keep fishing that. And you'll change your flies here and there to keep it interesting, because they do adjust to flies. That's something that trout in particular do really well. They'll start to figure out patterns, especially colors and shape and size. They'll start to figure out. So typically if you're changing flies, you want to change to really small if you've been really big, or the other way, if you've been really small, go really big, because that will definitely adjust their perception of what they're looking at, and colors helps as well. But yeah, find your column, fish your column well, and then be aware that at some point in the day, especially on a day like this, it's going to change. Water temperatures coming up, sunlight's hitting the water, shadows on the water, they're going to start feeding differently. The good anglers know when to make that change, and they'll adjust, typically finding a different column or different technique to catch those fish in. Okay, that's hot and cold.
So on that glass line,
Yes.
does that not give line flash?
No.
Have they done it? Is that
Yeah, so the old ones definitely used to. There was like a glint that used to come off them. But the newer ones, no. I mean, I'll tell you, I fished the lake last at Worlds, and there were 33 anglers setting up, and I think of the 33, probably 31 had glass lines on. Like, that's how good that line is. I don't know, I had this chat with Dan the other day. It is just good. Like, you can do so much with that line without having to change. You can fish quite high, you can fish quite deep. It's got a lot of stretch in it, so it's got a lot of give on bigger fish, smaller fish for the eat. I don't know, it's just a great line. Like, it's difficult to say.
maybe it's got a camouflage. It actually then
I've got it here. I'll show you it. Yeah,
compared to others, which is
it has definitely got a camouflage over it. The old glass lines were just clear.
in a clear.
Yeah,
The clear line.
it's a clear line with like a camouflage over it.
Oh, with a camouflage.
Yeah. Quite easy to. It's an intermediate line, yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's a unicorn line. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, pass it around. I'd like the real back, please, peeps. Yeah, so that's my favorite. Are there any questions at this point? Because now we've covered a few things.
So when you say fish the columns, like you in lanes and stuff, but it's really just the depth that you're looking at, and
Yes.
you're creating these columns in your head. It's not like there's like a low, a middle, and a top.
No, there's no white lines in the water. There's none of that. No.
You know, it's not as it's more just trying to figure that through the counting and understanding. When you hit the bottom, okay,
Yeah.
now you start building up your columns.
100%. And the more you do this, the more you'll figure out your favorites, and you'll figure out conditions suit certain depths. This is the difficult part to explore. So somebody will, a good example, I went to Wonderland, please don't shout at me, a few weeks ago. I was actually here, I wanted to fish here, but you had a competition the next day, so Wayne said no. Yeah. So I had my rod in the car, so I went there and I arrived at the trophy dam, and there was probably 30 people around that trophy dam. I thought, oh my God. So I took my nymphing rod actually, and I was just nymphing the edges. I got a fish, maybe saw 3 fish come out. And then I started to see the fish were starting to feed You can tell when a fish is feeding on the surface. Its nose and its dorsal fin break the surface. That's how you know a trout is feeding on top. When you're seeing the swirl and the bow wave but not breaking the surface, typically they're eating emerges. They're eating just subsurface, sub 10 centimeters. So I saw that start to happen there, and I thought, now Wonderland probably traditionally not known for fishing dry flies. So I put 2 dry flies on, about a meter apart, double dry fly, and I think within an hour I caught 25 or 28 fish. Quick, figuring it out. All I got right there was everyone else was casting sinking lines, stripping on the bottom, static eggs, and I was like, the fish are in the top 20-30 centimeters of water. And why are they there at 5 o'clock in the afternoon? Because they're about to be fed in an hour's time. So quite simple. But changes like that make a huge difference. So to answer your question, you're trying to figure out, and the way I divide them up is typically the first probably foot of water I see as a column, the next meter as a column, a meter below that, and then the bottom meter of the lake. That's kind of how I divide up my columns. So I want to be in one of those columns is what I'm looking for.
With the glass line, you wouldn't ever need to fish a sinking line.
No, but if I was fishing on a weekend just for fun, no, because I know I can get it there and I don't mind standing an extra 10 seconds to let it get down. In a competition, 10 seconds times by 100 casts, it hurts you. The number of times I've caught 3 fish in the last 8 minutes of a competition on a lake and placed first instead of fourth, like you can't afford to, so you've got to make the change there. But yes, if you're standing here, that glass line, I mean, if I had to say to anyone who is starting Stillwater fishing today, that would be the first line I'd tell them to buy. Buy that and a floating line and you're good to go for a very long period of time.
Share what the sink rate is on that. Or do you get different sink
You get different, so you get a slow version of it and a quicker version. I quite like both, but if I had to buy one, I'd buy the quicker one. It's 1.5 inches per second, that line. Yeah.
So we're here with like a much shallower dam. You want to take longer for it to get down?
You might want the slow one, yeah, 100%, yeah.
Where that says, your fly goes deeper than your line.
What fly are you fishing?
Okay, so you don't fish.
3 boobies are up here and my line's down here. I'm going to get to it though.
Okay, so you're not talking fishing beads.
No, again, it depends. So this is where it gets really difficult. Do I fish beaded flies? Yes. Do I fish brass? Yes. Do I fish tungsten? Yes. Unweighted? Yes. Do I fish boobies? Yes. But it's situational. So let's go through some of these techniques. Are we happy with temperatures? We all know what we're doing for temperatures. Maybe we talk cloud cover for a little bit. Cloud cover is an interesting one with fish because it doesn't necessarily mean a single behavior, but what it does definitely do is it changes their behavior. I can guarantee you the way it fishes now compared to in an hour's time when the sun comes out will change completely. And I'll give you an idea of how much this changes on a river, and it's exactly the same for a lake. I was fishing the Bushmans probably about 1.5 years ago. I was doing an exercise where every time a big cloud, it was one of those clear days, but you had those big cumulonimbus clouds that came past. You know, that shadow comes over you. Every time a shadow came over me, I stopped catching fish. It was irritating the hell out of me. And it would like 3, 4, 5 minutes, no fish, and then fish again. So I started changing my bottom fly, my point fly, because you're fishing 2 nymphing, from a black fly with a silver bead when the sun was out to like a dun fly, a PTN, with a copper bead, and on the change every time I'm catching fish, just because of the way the conditions changed. And I promise you that is like true as Bob, that works. Like you're fishing a river, change your fly when the clouds come over. Silver, black, for sunny conditions, go more brown and dun and more naturals when the clouds come over, and watch the difference immediately. And it was worth it. For 5 minutes, that's 2-3 fish on a good river. So
As well as fly,
color, fly and bead. So my staple is rose pink and silver if it's sunny. That's typically what I would start with. If the clouds come over, I go gold, nickel, copper, and a more brown, natural GRHE grayer, duller color fly. No flash, just dull. And watch the difference. Same with still waters. Clouds come over, fish feed differently. And within a minute, they change how they feed. Just while we're on that topic, brown trout, rainbow trout, I don't know, do we have browns in here? Yeah. Very different. So rainbow trout are schooling fish, so they fish in groups, and I'm sure people here have doubled up on this dam. There are a lot of fish in this dam. Catch one, you catch a second rainbow, one snaps off, you get lucky, you land both. Why is that? Because they're typically schooling fish. You'll have 5 in a pod, 10 in a pod, 50 in a pod, depending how long ago they were stocked. Even in wild fisheries, they do exactly the same. They school together. Brown trout are nomadic, solitary, whatever you want to call them. They tend to be residential. They'll stay in one place. There are places in Bosnia where you can pay to go fish for a fish on a beach, like Fred or Bob, and these fish are brown trout. And everybody's tried to catch them for years, and they've been in the same holes for years. You can see them. You'll go there year after year, and the same fish is holding there for the 10 years it's alive. So brown trout, I don't know, maybe you've had it on a river. I've had it in sessions where I miss a brown, and I'm like, I'm coming back for you at the end of my session. I come back and I get him with 2 minutes to go, and it's the same bloody fish. So they will tend to stay. Same in lakes. If there's a brown trout hiding against the reeds in this sort of 2-3 meter area, he'll be there throughout the season. He'll be there, so you can catch him over and over. They tend not to move around as much, and typically lower numbers, 1s, 2s, maybe 3s, but on their own. The other thing that's important to know is their metabolic rate is so much slower than rainbow trout. Rainbow trout are more aggressive, they feed more frequently. Brown trout, nearly half. Seen in hatcheries, that's why you pay so much more for brown trout. Rainbow trout in a hatchery will grow 95th percentile, so you're getting 2 centimeters a month if the water's good. A brown trout at 95th percentile, half a centimeter a month. Big difference. So just down to their feeding rate. And so that's why brown trout are often more special to catch.
So here's a weird thing. When we had the golds last
Yeah.
year, you could see the golds like neon signs, and you'd have the rainbows and browns.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't be able to see often the others below them.
Yeah.
The browns, more often than not, would be
Well-
following. Is that just opportunist?
Well, if I was a brown trout, I'd also hide below gold trout because it's going to get eaten first. The thing can't bloody hide. Those things swim around with a target on their back. You're not going to get eaten below that thing. Yeah, just thanks. Yeah.
Does the hobber stay like that much underneath the surface, or does it still continuously?
If you leave it long enough, it's going to sink. But if you're casting a normal cast, you'll hold in 5 centimeters. That's the purpose of a hover, is just to say subsurface and keep your flies up.
So your base line's your intermediate, and if you had to take another line to Worlds, what would it be? For your floating or your like a hover?
If I was fishing a lake like this, it would be a dry fly line, probably be a floating line. If I was fishing the lakes we typically fish that are very deep, I mean some of them 20-30 meters, probably a DI3, DI5, because you're going to have to at some point explore very deep. I wanted to touch on something you brought up, if I can remember what it was. Oh, the flies being below and above. So this is a very cool topic. So what is the best and secret I'm going to give you today about fishing a lake? What's the thing you can't forget, guys? Columns. Go fish columns. Now, fishing columns you can do with lines, but you can importantly do with flies as well. So I think anyone who listened to our podcast, we spoke about this a little bit. I don't change flies. Can't say that. 90% of the time I don't change flies because I think one fly is better than another. 90% of the time I change a fly because I want to change my technique to the fish. So I can do, let's use this glass line because it's a great line to use as an example. I can fish probably 4 or 5 different techniques with a single line, and let's go through them. I want to fish high up in the water column, but I want my flies to be coming down and up like this. So what am I going to do? I'm either going to put my glass line with 2 boobies and a bugger, a blob, a fab, a booby, something. I'm going to cast it out. I'm going to let that line sink, and then I'm going to start pulling, and it's going to bring my flies down, and they're going to come up a little bit, and they're going to go down, and because they're following the line's sitting deeper than my flies are in this instance. So that vertical movement for me is from the top down, and that could be a baitfish pattern diving. It could be a number of things that's imitating, but that allows me to cover the top columns down. Works very well. Then I want to fish, let's say I want to fish more natural flies in the middle column. I put a buzzer, I put a nymph, an unweighted nymph, whatever, a dalbach, whatever. I cast it, and from the moment it hits the water, I start figure eighting. And what's happening is that line is dropping the entire way to me very slowly, 1.5 inches or an inch per second, whatever it might be on that clear glass. And I'm in contact with my flies the whole time as they're moving pretty much in line, probably just above my line, if they're those natural flies. But I'm in contact with them the entire time, which means I'm just waiting for that little touch on the fly, and you've got a fish. Now we go the other way around. Now I want to fish that same line with 3 boobies, but I want to fish it from the bottom. So I cast that line, I count 20 seconds, I let it hit the bottom of the dam. What's happened, my line is lying on the sand at the bottom, but my 3 flies are lying a meter above that. Boom, boom, boom. And you can even vary that. You can have 2 tiny boobies. I don't know if you're going to be able to see, but you can have 2 tiny boobies something like that, and then you can have one bigger one on point, which means they're literally sitting at I don't know, 2 foot off the bottom, a meter up from that, a meter up from that. Now all of a sudden I'm covering 3 columns with my flies, and what happens when I pull my line? As I pull my line long, those flies dive and then they float up. And what happens, I'm not very good at this technique, I'll give it to Dan, I don't know why, he's bloody good at it, it irritates the hell out of me. But what happens is you pull that line long like this and you let it go, and those things dive, and sometimes you get the eat on the dive towards usually the back of the pool, somewhere here you get that eat. Or as you let it go and you're holding and these things are floating up, you just watch your line move off and you've got your fish. That's technique number 3 on that line, just by changing flies. Technique number 4, I take clear end line, I cast it with 3 tungsten flies or a fab and 2 tungsten flies. I let it sink to the bottom, I drag it along the bottom. Anyone ever caught fish like that, just dragging flies on the bottom? Especially when it's hot. It's very hot, they like maul it on the ground. It's quite interesting to eat. Now all of a sudden one line, just by changing my flies, didn't change my leader once, 4 different techniques. And that's why that line's quite a cool line. Help with the question where your flies are, and I think a lot of people don't think about that. They put flies on, but they're not thinking about what that fly is doing. Your biggest trick here is trying to understand what you're trying to achieve with your fly. Putting a blank saver is on great, but like, what's it doing? Where is it? What are you trying to imitate? Are you trying to move it through columns, down, up, flat on the bottom? Do you want it? Number of times you cast that intermediate line with maybe 2 boobies and a fab, like a biscuit fab or something. I've got them here, I'll show you. And you just figure eight it and you just hold it. You wait for the fish to swim along and eat it mid-column, just dead slow. So you got to think about these things all the time. Any questions on that?
With a super slow retrieve, if they pick it up and they move off with it, how often do they swallow it down, or do you often see the movement before they actually take it down?
Yeah, stocked fish are more of a problem than wild fish. Wild fish tend not to. Stocked fish, because they're used to eating pellets, typically there's more of a chance. Yeah, the reality is the more static the fly, the more time that fish has to eat it deep. But again, probably 7 out of 10 times when you pull it, you find the side of the mouth or the top of the mouth anyway. So it's going to come to the side or out anyway.
You're safe. When a fish like this, focus on fishing one
Yeah.
rod. Don't put one out there and then fish another one with streamers or something at the same time.
Yeah, yeah.
You're going to miss your...
Yeah.
A lot of people do
We'll do that, yeah.
increases the odds.
No. Usually you end up losing a rod or something along those lines. Yeah, sorry.
What is the general guideline between the space when you're fishing multiple flies?
Anything from 30 centimeters, or in comp 50 centimeters, you can't fish closer than 50 to 2 meters. So I'll give you an indication. In France we arrived, lakes in the is it the Pyrenees at the top there? Oh, no, I think it's the Pyrenees. You hike like 9 kilometers up there, crystal clear glacier lakes, and you just see brook trout swimming around everywhere. And you either catch them with tiny ants against the edges, it's amazing, some of the best fishing you ever do, or you take a tapered leader on your dry fly rod and you run that 6 foot and you tie a piece of 9X off that for the rest for another 14 foot with a single size 22 nymph. And you cast it out as long as you can, and all that happens is that nymph drops all the way down and you just stay in contact with it. So you paste up your line. You all know what pasting your line is, greasing your line. So you can, another trick, you can either sink it or float it. So you can paste it to float it or grease it to sink it. So if I want to do something right up high with nymphs, I can paste my leader as far as I want to keep just the flies a foot under, 2 feet under, 5 feet under, whatever. So in that instance, we'd paste the maybe 2 or 3 foot from the 9X on the tapered leader, cast and just let that thing sink. It's the coolest fishing ever because you just slow like this and you just see that line twitch, twitch. So fun. So yeah, it depends on, again, what you're trying to achieve. If you know the fish, my rule of thumb is if you know the fish are in one column, then you don't want the flies too far apart. You want as many flies in that column as possible. Anybody here nymph? Anyone fish the Vol, rivers, trout? What's the rule when you set up your nymphing rod? Heavy fly at the bottom, light fly on top, right? Why? Fundamentally, why are you doing it?
Get the flies down to the bottom. Cover 2 areas.
No, well, we'll get the flies down. Why not fish 2 heavy flies? Yes, we're going to get it. By the end of the day, we're going to have this. And even no. Even in a river, you're fishing columns. So the trick between having 70 centimeters, your columns are just smaller in a river, right? You're fishing the bottom 20 or 30 centimeters up. Anyone seen those videos of trout nymphing. They're all over Instagram. They're so awesome. You see them just swim up and get. Now, depending on the water conditions, they swim higher for some flies. And depending typically where the sun is, they might come right up higher. So that's all you're trying to do. That's why. Here's a little trick for you. If you're fishing the vol and you're catching fish after fish after fish on your bottom fly, works for trout as well, change your top fly to your heavy fly. What happens is that goes to the bottom, the other one trails. Now you've got 2 flies in the right column. Exactly the same as a Stillwater, it's just the same concept. Now you've got 2 flies sitting where the fish are feeding. That's the trick. Simple little thing. You'll double your catch rate overnight, quickly. Works for trout, works very well for yellows. If they're feeding deep on the bottom, if you're catching muddy after muddy in the mouth, real catch, do that and you'll see how many you catch. It's ridiculous. Cool. Any questions on that? Right, I need to get on topic again because we've been drifting off. Okay, there are a few things that I want to touch on here. If you haven't got polarized glasses and you want to fish seriously, polarized glasses are a must. If you can see a fish, you give yourself a lot more chance, and if you can cover a rise, you give yourself a lot more chance. So you should always be looking for activity on the surface of the water. It's like having a cheat sheet on a spelling test. Like, it really, really helps. You want to be able to see fish because you can work out how they're feeding. I'm quite keen to play with it later because I know this venue's fished quite a lot, but I will sometimes go to a venue like this and not take a Stillwater rod. I'll just take my nymphing rod, walk along the side, see fish feeding, drop a single nymph in on 9x because light tip, it makes a difference, and I'll explain why now. And just jig it around a little bit and you see the fish swim up and eat it. Don't feel it eaten is great. So polarized glasses are a big point. Again, clear water, winter, walk and stalk becomes something you have to think about. Shadows play a massive role. False casts play a massive role. You don't think they do, but they spook fish pretty quickly. So typically you want to stay probably a meter back, and your rod tip should just be off the edge of the lawn. That'll give you a much better chance of catching fish as well. Yeah, if you're on the jetty, I'd be on my knees. You want to be low, otherwise you're going to spook fish. Okay. Everyone know what the hang is? Nah. Who knows what the hang is? Fishing the hang. Who fishes the hang? Handful.
I listened to a podcast that advised.
Yeah. Did you listen, or did you listen to your wife listen? Like, listen. So the hangs are such a key part to fly fishing in. And this is why. Let's say you and your choma are fishing a meter apart on the bank and you're both casting lines out, because this equates to comp fishing, because you typically 2 up on a boat. And he casts and he pulls in and a fish follows it in but doesn't eat. And you cast and you pull in and fish doesn't eat. And now all you're doing is you're pulling all these fish towards you on the boat or bank, and they're here. But they're feeding, they maybe just didn't like the way you presented it. So what tends to happen, and this, I love this on the boat, it happened to me at this World. I didn't land the fish, it was my fault. But you check the oak and eat. So I love it when my boat partner says, oh, I've got to eat. I'm like, fuck, get my fly on the hang quick, because he's bringing that fly to the boat. So then as his fly gets there, I just dangle up, down, slow to the side. And I was fishing a sparkler. Anyone knows what a sparkler is? A sparkler is basically the spinner of fly fishing. You take a hook, you put a small bead on it, and you go to your daughter's room and you find as much tinsely stuff as you can find, and you just tie that on. It basically looks like a big spinner. And when you pull it through the water, it like glistens. And I was dangling this thing probably for 40 seconds, and I just saw this massive trout just come up and scissor this thing and off it shot. And I was like, thanks, buddy. I lost it, but it works so well. And the theory is that you're bringing fish into you all the time. So the majority of the fish, if you're doing it right, are actually around you, and you've activated them. They're interested, they're looking. So what you should be doing on the hang, I'll use this rod to show you, is you cast, you're bringing in, and you want to make a point on your line. So there's lots of ways to do this. You can draw a point with a Sharpie, Koki, or I quite like using like nail polish. What I found interesting about fly fishing over the years is I have more women's products now than I ever had before. Little hair ponies and nail polish, and it's a bit ridiculous. My wife comes to me when she needs Sally Hansen's. But you strip in, and then what I quite like about making that little ball on your line is as it flicks over your finger, you know you're at that hang point. And you can sometimes put 2. You can put one for a long hang and a short hang, and they're different. A long hang means you started far further away from you, and it's typically a much longer hang. And when I hit that bollocky, I'll lift my rod a little bit just to get the flies doing what? up the columns. So now I'm merging. So if you're fishing a sinking line, this is a great way to bring fish up, because they're going to see that thing flat, 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 and all of a sudden it merges. So often on that first meter of this, you'll get an eat. I didn't get an eat. So then I do a second one up, and then I do a third one up, and then I drop it. And then I bring it up sideways, so it's a little bit more lateral to the side. And depending how I'm fishing or how quickly I'm fishing, I might do that for 30 or 40 seconds, or I might do it for 10 seconds, flick the line and recast, and off we go. But it is so critical, and the more you start doing that, the more you'll realize how many fish you catch here. I don't know how many of you know Lucinda or followed the ladies. She's done this to me a few times on a boat where I'm pulling fish in the whole time and she sits with her bloody pink worm on the side like this. And I'm like, Lou, you're not even fishing. She's like, don't worry. Like, it is so frustrating, but I'm bringing the fish in constantly for her. So fishing the hang is something you must put in your arsenal and vary it. Vary how much you lift it, how slowly you do it, how quickly you do it. Drop the flies back down, bring them up. I've had fish eat nearly a minute on the hang, sitting just up and down, watching, waiting. And if you get a bump on your cast or a knock on your cast, 9 times out of 10 that fish is going to follow that fly right to the end, and the point at which you stall that fly is going to be the point at which they eat it. Now, catching fish on the hang is not about feeling the eat, because often you're not going to feel the eat because it's so slack and you're not pulling into it. So what you're watching for is you're watching your line very, very carefully, and you might feel a subtle rattle, but often you're just going to see the line twitch. You've got to, it's like nymphing. You've got to watch for that little twitch and then just strike into it, and that's that fish eating. Sometimes you're lucky enough that the water's clean enough and the fly is high enough that you'll see the eat, which is quite cool too. But if you don't, when you're fish 2 or 3 flies normally, your top fly is in the top 10 centimeters and you're just watching that, it's almost acting as an indicator. You're just waiting for some movement on that, a little bit of pullback, and off you go. Cool. While we're talking about hang, I just want to talk about midging. Anyone done midging before? Floating line, hover line, buzzers, nymphs, natural stuff. Like, this is the clean way of fishing, guys. No buggers, no blobs, no boobies. Yeah, I know you love it. Yeah. No. You have a dog, buddy. Nothing else. So yeah, here's a few tricks to midging's a whole different technique, and it's an important technique to have because it's a way to fish very natural in the water. And if the fish are eating natural, they're eating nymphs and they're eating little emerging buzzers, it's a great way. You can have big days on this, but you've got to know when to pick up and fish that. And typically for me, it's when the fish, you can see them moving subsurface and feeding subsurface. You're seeing the swirls, you're seeing the movement, but they're not breaking the surface. Often then I'll go to buzzers and midges, just like that fish did there, just under the surface. And what you want to do there is you want to be able to put a nice line out, traditionally or typically 2 or 3 flies, probably about 50, 60 centimeters, 70 centimeters apart. You can also fish an attractor pattern up front to the other 2 natural flies just to bring the fish in, because they will come and look at bright colored things. They like to see what's going on, and then they'll typically turn onto your more natural flies. So you can go all natural, or you can add some color on your top fly. And then what you're looking for is there's 2 ways to fish them. You can't really midge on feel. The take is so subtle, you're going to be too slow on the eat anyway. Ever seen a trout eat a fly? So quick, guys. Especially when they realize it's a hook, it's in and out. Like, it's spat out in seconds. There are videos online, it's not seconds, milliseconds, it's so quick. So when you're nymphing in a river and you get, missed it. That fish ate, you were just like way behind it. So quick. So what you're going to do is you're going to cast out, and what you're looking for is any movement on your leader line or your dry fly line, depending on whether you pasted it up to keep it high or not. You're waiting for the little movement on the line. And what I do quite like for this technique is a bit of wind. Bit of wind is always a great time to start doing that, because the fish start coming up a little bit more, they're not as scared, and they'll eat more actively in that top column, so you can fish to it. So a little bit of movement, cast, watching the tip of your line, very slow retrieves. People often ask how slow. Very slow. You want that line hardly moving. You throw the odd twitch in just to activate it, but super slow, figure of 8, just stay in contact, wait for the eat. Such a nice eat, because usually once you've seen the twitch, you strike into it and the fish has already eaten it, and you just feel that heavy head shake. It's a great way to catch them. And the second way to do it, which is another tip I'm going to give you today, in fact, we'll put a hat on this one. No, who told you that? Yeah, she gone. So there's a second way to catch fish, and this we learnt in Australia and Tasmania, and it's such a great way to do it off a boat, because the problem with a boat is you can't really watch your line because the boat's moving so quickly. You're typically in a wind lane, so there's big chop and sunlight, and like you just actually can't see at 15-20 meters the end of your line, so it's a guessing game. So can anyone tell me how else you would figure out you're getting an eat there and you're not feeling it? I can guarantee you're not feeling it there. You're just trying to keep up with your line. Anyone? No, you're not changing your technique. Still fishing buzzers, but there's a way to see the eat. Not allowed to fish them what we do, but it would be the same as a bung or blob. Anyone? Okay, we'll keep it for later. If you see a flash at 20 meters on a lake like that with a wind chop, you are Superman, superhuman. You could guess, I guess, and just strike.
But on a river, you can see often the eat.
Yeah, you can see the flash, 100%. So here's the trick for you if you're midging, and try it, it's super fun. Cast your line out, and instead of watching the end of your line, and when it's flat like this is a great way to do it, at the end of your line, at the end of your rod tip, you know how your line dips into the water? Anyone ever seen how it dips into the water? It creates like a reverse bow. Anyone bow hunt? So if you took a bow and you turned it like upside down, upside down, it creates that look, like a slippery slide. Don't watch anything else. Just stay in contact with your line and keep the bow at the same trajectory. And all that happens is your line straightens out a little. And you just enter it like that. It's such a cool little trick. If you haven't done it, try it. It's a great way. You could be completely blindfolded beyond the end of your rod tip, and it works so well. You just see the line, you keep it at that level, and it just does that slowly.
By the time you feel it, it's too late.
No, this technique,
You've seen it happen in front of your rod, by the time you feel it on your hand.
probably
it's too late.
half a second. So you just, and you can test it on a dam like this because you can pull it through the weed, and weed will do the same thing. It'll straighten that line. It's exactly the same technique. It's
As your line is going into the water in front of you.
yeah. As you're from your tip to the line, you maybe got before it enters, you've maybe got half a meter of line, and that line's never straight unless you full strip. It sits like this. You'll see it. So you're just slowly keeping that like that, and you'll watch it straighten out. And it's like a medium. It does it at this pace. And you just to the side, and you're in.
A lot of people obviously targeting buzzers and trotters more when they're sort of coming up through the column, but obviously they often hatch out of the mud.
Yeah.
So to get them at that depth, people often don't go
Deep.
enough.
Yeah.
But it's sometimes tough to identify when you get them when they're hatching out the mud and when they're moving up.
And you can do it both ways. When you see fish feeding subsurface, they have to start from the bottom to get to the top. So you can fish them at the bottom. I think there's two reasons people don't do it as much. It's not as exciting. It's quite cool to see the fly line move and get the eat on top. It's also easier because identifying eat at depth on a sinking line, there's so much more tension. It's very difficult to get it right. So if you want to try that, if you want to try fishing buzzers deep, the trick is to put a more buoyant fly on your point fly with two of these, which just keeps them sitting just off the bottom. So it's like they've just emerged. It's a great way to get them deep.
Or is it similar to what you're using on the rest of your...
I keep changing buzzers in particular. I change the lip color. So red lip, yellow lip, chartreuse lip. Yeah, the lip on the buzzer. I've got a few here. My favorite one is here somewhere. Yeah. You can pass it around. The one right at the top on the left with the red lip is my favorite buzzer.
Brett, on the point, like when if you're fishing a washing line, what's your go-to fly on the point? Is like an attractor because often I use like an orange booby and they often come up with orange booby.
Yeah. Matt Burgess has really got me onto that biscuit fab. It irritates me, but like for a long time, it's like a tan color fab. It sits high in the column. I love that fly. Like it's a great attractor. Fish eat it.
So you use that as a washing line, you use a fab.
Yeah, I'd use a fab probably on point. Yeah, I use a booby, but I quite like that fab on point. It also for a stock dam, it looks like a pellet. Like it's a great little fly. The other thing is, if you're seeing fish like coming onto your fly as you're casting it, that plop. People often go to bigger buggers or bigger patterns. Sometimes the best thing to catch those fish in stock dams is a tiny little nymph with like a 2.5 or 3 mil bead, because that plop is so natural. It works really well on stocked fish. While we're on it, I just want to talk about a mistake that people may, and Wayne and I spoke about this a little bit. One of the great things that will help you fish better and catch more fish is your tippet size. Now, the problem with tippet size, it's kind of risk and reward, right? Because you can drop down in tippet size, but can you fight the fish? Will it snap off on the eat? It becomes a little bit problematic. So typically in a competition, if it's normal, we're usually fishing to a kilo and a half fish in a world's competition. Typically on first day we start on about 4.5x, and on the last day you at about 6.5x, depending how tough the fishing's getting. But even in a session I'll be dropping down tippet sizes, because it really plays a role. And it plays a role for two reasons. One, it changes your sink rate on rivers and lakes. The thicker your tippet is, the slower your flies are going through the column, and it makes a big difference. That micro drag makes a massive difference to the amount of fish you catch. And the second side of it is, the thinner it is, the less likely you are to catch a glint or shadow or spook a fish. So the thinner you go, you're certainly going to catch more fish, but the challenge is then keeping that fish on. So here's a trick when you do start dropping down, because we've spoken about this. You also don't want to sit at a venue where you've got people snapping off 3 flies at a time and you have fish swimming around with bungs and all sorts, so you want to be careful of that. The trick to catching fish like that is your rod tip. So you can fish very light. You can catch fish in this dam. My dry fly rod I was casting on now is 8x. You can cook and fight fish fine on that. But it's all about, if you are dead straight on your line and your line's straight in front of you and you're pulling, that thing's going to snap off mid-pull if you're on a light tippet. 3x, 4x you might be fine, but straight like that, because all the tension is on the reel and to the fish, so it's going to snap off. Simple trick is just to either dip your rod tip under the water. It takes the impact of the eat out, so maybe 10 centimeters under the water. Sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't like the feeling of having my rod tip under the water, but it works well. The better one is just put your rod tip, if your line's there, you put your rod tip to the side. Why is the rod tip of the rod so thin? It's there to take the impact of the eat. That's why they're bendy. You want it to take the impact of the eat. So by turning it to the side, all of a sudden it's not directly on your reel. You're using your rod for what it's made for, and you can fish incredibly light on that just by doing that. The other trick is, and I see this quite commonly when it comes to fighting fish, rivers and lakes, is you see people fighting fish with a rod bent like that. Now the problem with fighting a fish with a rod bent like that while it's pulling is it's on your line, it's on your reel, you're not using your rod. Does everyone understand that, or not making sense? You hold that for me. I'll try not to zook you. Yeah, I get my eat right straight. If I'm stripping here and my line's straight, look at this, it's gonna snap. If I'm here, see how the rod takes the impact of the eat. Logical, easy. Same story when you're fighting a fish. If I'm fighting a fish like that, how much more tension is to my hand or to my reel? If I'm fighting a fish like this, how much give do I have?
So the higher the rod.
It doesn't have to be the height of the rod. It has to be the bend of the rod. I can fight a fish here. I can fight a fish here. Fighting a fish up is you actually have a much higher percentage, probably about 20% higher chance of losing a fish up here. Down to the water, far lower chance, but you want the bend. Use your rod, guys. You pay a lot of money for these things. Use them. Please stop fighting fish like this. You're going to snap off many fish like this. Use your bend.
That's the 2 rabbit hole questions
Yeah.
here. Is there an optimal angle of striking at to catch that fish? First question. The second one, once you've now, using light line, you've managed to hook it, how do you manage the fight of that fish so that you can get it as quick as possible so that you can then get it back, resuscitate it again?
Yeah.
So it's not time.
Okay, the first question was the
angle is this optimal
strike. So depending what you're doing, you typically don't want to strike straight up. And the reason for that is your fly, when a fish eats, you've got more chance of catching it. Most fish you catch in the sides, right? The odd one on the bottom lip, the odd one on the top lip, but mostly on the side. So when it pulls out the side, the hooks tend to sit better on the side. That's why strike at a slight diagonal angle either way is better than straight up. You'll get a much better hook rate by doing it like that. The second question about fighting is an interesting one, because the fish is going to determine what you can do to a large degree. You catch a 9-pound fish in the Eastern Cape, good luck to you. Like you're in for the ride. Hop on the roller coaster and have fun. But there are tricks to getting fish in quickly, and we use them in competition fishing a lot, because the game is get it in as quickly as possible, measure it and get it out as quickly as possible. So you don't want to be stuffing around on a still water. The other thing is the longer you fight a fish on a still water, the more chance you have of something going wrong. Swims into a log, swims into the weed, line snags its tooth, slices your line, hook turns its angle. Anyone ever had that fighting a fish perfectly and it's just gone? Yeah, so it's typically your hook. So that's why like comp anglers take it to the next level. What hooks do you fish? And we're so pedantic about what hooks and how sharp they are and the gape of the hook. But it's that you're trying to avoid that movement. If you picture it's hooked in the mouth, that hook's swiveling in its mouth all the time like this. Now I've watched anglers do this. All you're doing is you're moving that hook like this. At some point it's going to just pop out and fish is going to be gone. So you want to keep it quite static to one side. With that said, to get fish in quickly, to answer your question, you want to keep them up high. If you're hooking a fish high, I've had it many times, you hook it and it starts tail flapping on the surface. You can land 8-pound fish in seconds if you can keep its head up for long enough, because it's got no traction, it's got no momentum in the water, it can't pull you anywhere. The moment its head turns and it can use its tail and body, then you just chase it down. High.
There's also, as you keep it higher up, if you can just get it to take one gulp of air,
Yeah.
it obviously
It's up high.
reduces the amount of energy that it's actually getting into its.
My second fish at the lake in Worlds probably took a second and a half to land. It ate on the hang, it was tail flapping, it was a 52 centimeter fish, it was tail flapping. I just grabbed my net and went, you're not going anywhere, like in. The second one I tried to do it on, snapped off. Like overexcited, bit of adrenaline, but you're kind of weighing that up, but you can do it like that. And it's the same for a river. So I know it's lake session, but really cool because I think a lot of us fish rivers. I see this all the time on rivers, and it's hard to watch. People catch big fish on rivers, and what do they start doing? That fish runs off and their rod's up and high and it's in a column. And the problem is, as it gets up in the column, now it's in the fast water, and all it does is it turns its body sideways, and now you're fighting drag on that fish. It's like taking a plastic, pick and pay plastic bag, tying to it, sticking in the current, and you just chase that thing. How many times on the Vol you've seen someone chase fish downstream? Fall. Like, there's a trick to this. When you catch a fish, use this rod, it'll be easier. When you catch a fish, and it's the same on a lake but better on a river because there's current, we have to go, this is 8x, so let's go lighter on this one. So you hook your fish. Now you can fight it here, but the problem with fighting it here is it's going to move up in the current, it's going to do everything. So because on rivers overseas we catch sometimes a 45 centimeter brown, but you're on 8 or 9x, like you've got to be really careful, and you're dealing with all the structure in the river. So the Spanish have got really good at this. They'll hook their fish, they turn their rod to the side in the current, and they hold it like this. And feel free to try this. That fish will not move. You could hold it there for 3 minutes. It goes to the bottom, and you keep about that much tension. Not that much, because as soon as you do that, it's going to move. But you hold it with about that much tension, and it sits. And why do we do that? One, I don't want to be chasing it downriver, because I'm going to chase it through all my water and spook everything. I don't want to hurt myself either. But when it's here, I've got time, I can get my net, I can look around, is there slacker water on the side? Can I walk it to that slacker water one step at a time slowly, and then lift its head quickly? You don't have to yank it around the river. So the next time you're fishing a river and you catch a fish, you hook it, you turn your rod to either side of you, and you just hold it in the current like this, and that fish will go to the bottom and it will just sit. And then you can think through everything, and then what you can do is lift your rod and you'll feel it come up in the column, feel how much fight it's got, and take your rod back down, and it just goes back to sleep on the bottom. You can do that over and over and over again.
And how important is it to keep the fish like up in front of you rather than it's getting back down in that current and you're fighting?
You can't land fish, you can do it, but you can't land big fish like that. Pulling a fish up in the current, you're going to pop the fly, bend the hook, you're giving yourself a huge shot. You want the fish typically, so from here, if I've hooked a fish and I've got it tied, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my net ready while I hold it. It now is ready to go. I'm going to take 1 or 2 steps down. I'm going to pull my rod up so it comes up in the column, and I'm going to slide it diagonally at me across the current and net it there. Before it's behind me, it's coming at me from probably 45 degrees up. So I'm going to just pull it slowly up and then put it through. Cool, thank you. Any questions?
We'll need you back in.
No, I'll have it after. Are they good? In a river, yeah. And in a still water, if you want to shorten the fight, try keep it up in the column, close to the surface as you can. You'll shorten it substantially, your fight substantially. Okay, leaders. We'll get on to leaders because it's a big one and people ask a lot of questions about leaders. So on Stillwaters, anyone who watches our podcast, very seldom will I fish a tapered leader. I'll fish a tapered leader on my floating lines typically because I want to be able to fish very light tippet off that, and I'm typically fishing dry flies, buzzers or nymphs, so I want to be able to change quickly, and that's easy to do. So I would have probably 5 or 6 foot of leader onto a tippet ring, and then I can change off that. The other reason for that is I can change tippet size really quickly on that. I can go from a 4x leader to 6x tippet because it's off a tippet ring, it doesn't matter, I can change.
The knot you use for your tippet ring.
Yeah.
I've had lots of issues with that. So what knot do you use?
What tippet are you using?
Let's just go with 4x.
What brand? Fluorocarbon or mono?
Both.
Okay. So I doubt both, but I'll tell you why. So usually knots going on a tippet ring is the friction as you drag it to the knot. So are you wetting your knot?
Yeah.
Okay. So try and, what knot are you tying? Clinch or?
I've tried a few, and I have an issue with them. Just
Okay.
breaking off.
I'll show you a quick penny later. So I usually use a quick penny there because I don't want a big knot, and it's a 2-second knot, and it's got very little friction. So on a tippet ring, I want very little friction when I drag it onto, because the more friction you have, the more that line frays, which means more likely to snap at that point. And the tippet ring's quite sharp, so if you've got a little fray in your line, when it's sitting on that tippet ring, it's accentuated, it's going to snap easily. So what I would say, your big tricks is try have less drag of your knot down, so there's less friction down, so shorten the knot loop, if that makes sense, and then wet it a lot and pull it on. But I'll show you a quick penny as well, but you can tie a number of different knots on there. I just like that because there's less friction to it. Dry fly line, 6 foot of leader, tippet ring, and then you can do everything you want off that, nice and easy. All my sinking lines are typically just straight mono, so you don't need anything else. You turn those flies over perfectly, and also because of how we comp fish, I don't want to be changing leaders all the time. So my typical setup on a water like this would be about 1 meter to my first fly with a dropper of about 25 centimeters, quite a long dropper, because I want to change that.
1 meter from the fly line.
Flat.
First try.
If I'm fishing 4x, 1 meter, first fly. 1 meter, fly. 1.5 meters, fly. 20 foot, done. Simple. One line. The other thing with that is it's so nice to change. If you get a little knot, wind knot, or your droppers start getting short, you bite it off, you put the two next to each other, surgeons, pull them together, you got a tag, granny knot, off you go, quick.
Do an L knot to the fly line or a loop to loop, or
Yeah, so I'm going to get to it, and I've actually brought my vise today to show people. So I think majority of people here would be fishing a welded loop on their line, what it comes with. We don't do it, haven't for a long time, so it feels terrible. You buy a brand new line for $2,500 and cut the welded loop off. It's hard to do, but the reason we do it is the welded loop is actually, the way they weld them on, it's never straight, and it bends in the reel when you have it a while, and it's not nice to fish with. It's clunky, it hits the water hard. So what we typically do on our braided core lines is we cut that off. We take a bit of either your nippers, and you take the coating off the line, or you use your wife's, what do we take nail polish off with? Acetone. Yeah, there's the one. On maybe 10 centimeters, take that off, and then you've just got left with the braid, and then you loop the braid over into a very small loop. You put like a size 2 or size 4 hook through, and you create a loop, and I'll show you how those look off the line. Why? It's small, doesn't make big splashes, and that braid is flexible, so it moves really nicely with your flies. So that's what we typically do on those lines. On my midging lines, my hover lines, and my floating lines, I do a needle knot. So you put a needle through the front of your line. I'll pass this around because it's got one. Do everyone know what a needle knot looks like? Oh, you're in for a treat. I'll show you how to do one as well. This is a needle knot. So on all my dry fly lines, especially on rivers, that's the knot. So you'll see the line actually comes out of your fly line. There's no knot. It's smooth all the way. So you have no knot when fighting fish. It's just one piece of line on. So you'll have a look.
so it's a needle knot with the rest of the nail.
Yeah, 100%. So you can have a look at that. But yeah, leaders are very simple. People think they're very complicated. The only thing you're changing on your leader is how far apart your flies are based on columns. Sometimes you want to keep 2 flies in the bottom column and 1 up because you want that movement. Sometimes you want all 3 in different columns, and you're just changing the distance between them to match the columns you're trying to. And if I've got fish feeding on the bottom, I'm putting 3 tungsten flies on, and I'm keeping all 3 in the bottom. If fish are feeding right up high, I'm putting a fab and 2 boobies, and I'm keeping them up high. All I'm thinking about is columns the whole time, because that's where we're going to catch the fish.
Brett, but if say if you had your intermediate on now, like here, if you often know the fish shoal here, so if you cast to the fish and your first drop is only a meter away from your fly line, often the fly line hits the water and they scatter.
Yeah.
So you just obviously extend it then, depending on, you know, if they...
No, because you got 2 other flies. You just cast better. If you slap the water, you're going to spook a fish anyway. But it's also not the end of the world in a venue with a high quantity of fish, because you've got the whole cast, and you're not necessarily aiming to catch the fish on the drop. That's a happy-go-lucky. That's a nice to have. You're trying to catch the fish on the technique you're trying to fish. So the reason for that, how often we catch the fish on that first meter fly, is your contact is amazing to it. So like anyone who's tiger fished on the Zambezi, you don't fish longer than a meter and a half leader, because you need that contact. And the other thing is, if you're trying to get, if I'm fishing a DI 5 line because I want to be right on the bottom, the fly that's going to be there first and the most is that one, because it's going to be sitting just behind my line. So your contact to it is incredibly good.
When you're doing a drop that you said 25 centimeters in this instance, and you want to change flies,
My wife's version or my version?
or how big the fish
25 centimeters. Yeah.
like, because you're changing, when you're changing flies there, right?
Yeah.
That's getting shorter and shorter.
Yes.
So how do you what's the best way to manage that? Are you then just clipping, doing your surgeon and starting again, or?
So if you've got 3 flies on and your top dropper is getting shorter and shorter, surgeons becomes difficult, because now you've got to thread all those flies through. I don't have the time. So if it gets to a point where now it's too short, on a 25 centimeter dropper, I'll get about 8 or 10 fly changes on that. So if I'm going past that, I've done really badly, or I've made a big mistake. But let's say I do get to that point. When I get to that point, I'm biting either side of the knot off, so the little piece of drop is gone, and I'm taking the 2 lines and I'm running them against each other like that. I'm doing a surgeons here, and I'm doing a surgeons there, but with a long tag. When I pull them, it's a Duncan knot. So when you pull them together, you've now got the dropper hanging off, and I tie it just a granny knot just to clinch it at an angle, and it perfect, holds great. So yes, but if I don't have time, I've got to do it. But yeah, you have, 100%, but not by much, just by maybe 20 centimeters. So you're still roughly where you need to be. In a perfect world, if I've got time, I'm going to change the leader, especially if it's working. But I might have 10 minutes left in a session, I don't have time, and that's going to take me less than a minute to do that and put a fly on. So that's going to be the way I do it.
And so then of that 25 centimeters, when is that too short? Like, when are you?
When you can't tie it on anymore. So you typically want a little bit of movement. So let's talk about movement of a fly. So why do we fish larger profile flies? 100%. They move water, they create commotion, they activate fish. So the more water your fly is moving is great. Your longer your dropper, it's doing exactly the same thing. There's all this movement that it's creating when you're fishing a river or when you're fishing a lake. It's doing that. So the shorter that gets, the more restricted it is. The other thing is the fish is more likely to see your knot than your line. So the closer you bring it, the more likely you are to spook a fish last second. So you want to keep that thing longer. But when you're running out of time or you don't have time on your side, you can go pretty short, and you can still tie a fly on a dropper this long. It's not great, but you can still get away with doing it. So you can do it that way.
And then also, then just so the last one on the meat, like the meter and the meter and a half, like when that's also, it's the same concept, right? Like,
same concept. Especially if it's working, you want to stick to it. But if I'm going to drop 20 centimeters and I'm doing roughly the same thing, it might not make much of a difference. Yeah. One of the other tips I want to give away today, and we'll put the hats on it again, see if someone can get it right. What is the best, I mean, again, I'm going to pick a venue like this, it's fished a lot. What is the best technique to fish to super, or my best technique to fish to super pressured fish? So fish that see flies 4 or 5 days a week, they get caught all the time on the same flies. Like, what are you changing to? Slow, small, yeah. Yeah. It's not the technique, but it's close. My favorite to pressured fish is to fish 2 dry flies. and it's for a couple of reasons. One, often stocked fish are feeding up, because again, or however they're brought up, pellets floats, they're feeding up there. But importantly, they look very natural on the water, and fish feeding like that, the first cast I had there, I had one go at it. So you can do a few things with a double dry. You can float them on the surface, you can create commotion on the surface with a couple of twitches, it'll bubble and plop, which immediately if they're looking up is attractive to them. And the third thing is you can strip them subsurface, and a dry fly stripped subsurface is incredibly impactful here. The other one that works really well is fishing a bung. We all know what a bung is. Something that you're going to float flies underneath. So something like a CDC bung or something that you float flies underneath. But don't underestimate. People think dry fly is a purest technique. You fish it on the Bushman's River, walking up the valley, and I agree with them 100%. I guarantee you a double dry fly here on the surface with an odd strip, strip it slowly under the surface. You'll get a lot of eat, and it's such a cool eat because you'll see the bow wave come at your fly. So from 2 meters out, you know that eat's coming, and you just consistently don't change what you're doing and you just wait for the tension. It's super exciting. Any other questions on that? Flies. Yeah.
So like a junior, fishing a shallow dam like this all the time, and he's so frustrated, and it's only weeds all the time.
Yes.
What would you change to put him on fish easier?
Typically juniors outfish the adults. That's been my experience. Normally dad gets outfished. But I would two things. Either I would try go up on your line. It's a simple thing. So if you're fishing an intermediate or a sink line, you're in the weeds. If he doesn't have that, it's quite simple. Put floating flies on. You can fish a line right on the bottom with floating flies and you fish above it. A dam like this, one of the better techniques, and I know the individuals here that do it, is to put a line that sits just subsurface, like a midging line or even a floating line, and you strip a skinny damsel, something that's unweighted, something that's just like a marabou body, olive or brown. And what it does is it imitates a damsel coming through the weeds. So you're not going to get stuck in the weeds. It sits just above and you catch fish. And that's another nice trick. It worked really well for me at Nationals. We spent 3 days practicing and geez, we struggled. I could not catch fish in the bloody lakes in KZN. In fact, we all struggled. And on the last day, I spent about 3 hours trying to figure out whether these fish were sitting on the weed beds, and I came right on my interline, counting it down to about 20 seconds and sitting 3 flies on the weed beds and just stripping them slowly so you could feel it like just dragging along the top of the weeds. And I must have got about 40 fish, and I said to the guys, I think I've got it. We put our whole team on it. We caught about 100 fish that afternoon, and we came right on the lakes. We doubled most people's numbers on the lake just by getting that technique sorted out. Just fishing them on the weed bed, but they wanted it, and they also wanted it lifting off the weed bed. So you drag it along the weed, and then that little fly would come off the weed bed. And once again, the blank saver was fantastic. I don't know why that fly works so well. It's just a really, really good fly.
So if because you often get caught on the weeds, and it leaves a little, thing behind the fly. Doesn't that make a difference?
It does. You'll often catch a fish with the weed as well. And fish aren't always as pedantic as you think. When we were in France fishing the Pyrenees lakes, I think it's the Pyrenees. Is it the Pyrenees? Someone help me. Yeah, sounds like it. I had about 4 minutes left in my session, and they were eating dry flies against the bank. It's the coolest fishing. You walk and stalk on the bank, and the wind pushes the food to the bank. By the way, we all know that, eh? Wind blows food onto the bank. So you can feel the wind coming up now. Always want to be on the bank where the food is being pushed to because it drags onto that bank. And the fish actually, the banks were undercut. They would sit under, and you would just see these tiny swirls on the side, like not noticeable. So I saw one as I came around the bay, and I had about 5 minutes left. I had a great session going on. I threw my dry fly. You're fishing 9X, you have to. They're so like spooky. And a brown, probably 40 something centimeters, came out like an eel from the bank, ate it. I was so excited. Snapped it. I was like, 4 minutes left. Get it in, retie the piece of leader, dry fly on, and I thought I'm going to cast 1 or 2 long and just see if something eats it. And I looked over, and the fish had moved right back into the little bay. I was like, hey, casted one. Let it drop a little bit, swam up, ate it. One fly hanging out here, other fly hanging out here, full leader. And that was probably about 2 minutes apart. So it can definitely, it definitely happens. I don't know how long I'm meant to go for. One of the things I did want to do is casting as well, because I think a big part of being able to fish nicely is to, one, cast well, but also not create wind knots, and I think that's frustrating when you're learning. So I don't know if there are any other questions specific to techniques, to flies, things you want to do, because we can do that for a few more minutes, and then I'd like to show how to cast. Yeah, so retrieves are 100% important, but I think the variation of retrieves is probably the most important thing. And again, it goes back to the mindset of what are you wanting that fly to do. You're not putting a buzzer on to strip it through the water, because well, what's the point? And likewise, you're not putting a streamer on to just fish it static, although you can do it under a bung. It works quite well, but yeah, retrieves are important. Again, I think the thought process behind your retrieve goes to your technique. If you're fishing to try and aggravate fish and jerky quick retrieves, I've heard a lot, kind of the top retrieve is a 1 to 15 centimeters medium speed. That seems to be the go-to globally. I probably like a medium cast and an in contact long, and then twitch combined with longer, twitch longer, so the fly is doing different things. If you ever take a fly and put it in the swimming pool, twitch it, see how it moves, pull it long, see how it moves. Your retrieve also is going to be very important to where the fly stays in the column. So if you're retrieving quickly and you're on a die 3 line, it's just coming straight up. If you're fishing a die 5 or die 7, you're just pulling it along the bottom. So you've got to try to figure out what you're doing there. But again, temperature of the water, how slowly you do it, how quickly you do it, and what are you trying to do. I try to vary it quite a lot till I find something that's working, and then work with that.
You don't want to stretch your legs.